the harder nut, behavioral. Structural is kind of easy, sort of. You get some strategies in place, you make some assignments on some staff work plans, and you run the process, and you run it regularly, and you refine it, and you get it better. But this stuff's a little hard. So this is what we try to do in our shop. It doesn't always work. We're constantly working at it and constantly training and teaching, but we try and foster a climate of fun development and diversification on our staff. Marlena has really considers all of our staff fun developers. She considers me kind of a point in that, but she wants all of our staff thinking of resources, strategies, partnerships, and building on those and bringing those ideas back to the shop. We've got to constantly remind our staff of that. We have some staff who believe fun development is the job of Dan, or it's the job of someone else in our shop. Just let me do my thing. And I think we're better served with our grants, and we get more grants when everybody's on board with doing it. And we're not doing it because we want more. We're doing it because we want our community to do more and push out more funding. I talked about regularize. It's a tough word this morning, or this afternoon. Regularize the funding conversation and plan. Don't chase funding. Done that too. Chase, chase, chase. Right. Chase, chase, chase. We didn't think through our strategy. We didn't have a well-baked plan. We just thought, well, there's some money, and we need money, so let's go after the money. You don't get that money, usually, if you're chasing. You have to be much more thoughtful and strategic. Read the solicitation. Every good grant has a solicitation. It's the funder signaling their intent of what they want to achieve through the disbursement of these dollars. You need to read that solicitation again and again and again. I'm saying that in kind of a personal reference because as much as you'd think I would actually know that and have changed my own behavior on this, when I was working on this grant I was talking about earlier a couple weeks ago, 4 days before the deadline, Sunday afternoon, I'm writing, and I'm in my office, and all of a sudden I was on my desk, and I glanced at the solicitation again. I was like, no, that can't be. That limitation can't be. No way that can be. And I look back at the whiteboard behind me, right? This 4x8 whiteboard, and the whole model is built on this assumption. And son of a gun, this can't be. But the solicitation was a little clear, and I started to panic. And I called friends and colleagues. It was like throwing out, somebody throw me a life preserver right now. I'm 4 days out, and we've got a fatal flaw. And I got the help I needed, Sue, actually from MJ, to counsel me down off the ledge. And my model was actually strong enough to take the blow that came late, and we still got a really good grant in. But I should have read that thing again or sooner, So read it often because you'll get surprised. Design and develop model. Here's what I recommend you do if you go down this pathway of doing grants. Don't write anything for a long time. Build your design, build your whiteboard, then do your outcomes and your budget at the same time. We don't put pen to paper until the budget is locked, the outcome matrix is locked, and I have a rock-solid 2-page abstract describing what we're doing. Only when those 3 things are done do we start to write the full narrative. I think a lot of grant developers start writing. And they write the narrative because it makes them feel good. You've got a 20, 30-page narrative to write. That's a big assignment. Let's start writing. The problem is if you haven't really thought through all the structural things, you're going to come back and fix that narrative constantly, and you're going to run out of time. So go backwards. Flip the model on its head. Test the model, find its flaws, stay focused on reasonableness. We have these conversations all the time. Is the cost per too high? Is the cost per too low? Are our outcomes over-promising or under-promising? These are good questions to have when you're designing a grant. Can our partners really manage this money? Do they know what we've signed them up for? But we constantly ask, is this reasonable? Does this make sense to you? Is it just a normal human being? And if it passes that test, it's going to pass a grant reader's test usually. Create thoughtful decisions. Don't be scared of saying no to a grant. We've done that plenty of times. And celebrate your victories when you get them. We need to do a better job of that, by the way, in our shop, because we get a grant and then we're like, whew, let's go write another one. Metrics. I'm going to kind of cruise through this because I want to get to some questions here. But We keep metrics on the funding we've applied for, what's pending, when it's supposed to be announced, and the results of any grants we put in. We keep track of every grant that's ending in our shop 6 months in advance of the grant end, so that we know that we have a fund source that we need to potentially sustain, and we start working on it 6 months out before the end. Keep track of new grants and funding available. We keep, oh, thank God we do this, historical tracking documents of grants we've worked up. Because what happens in even corporations, corporate philanthropy, but pure philanthropic organizations, and certainly the federal government, they release the same thing on about every 3-year cycles. And I was noticing a trend in our organization. A grant would be released, and I'd be like, that sounds familiar to me. Okay, bring everybody in. Let's whiteboard this thing. And we start the whole process over again. And our burn rate was going up in terms of inefficiencies. So we keep full workups on every grant we've applied for. It's on our shared drive internally so people can reference it or reference it from home. And when a grant it comes out again, we go back and see if we've already done a workup on it, and then we can be more speedy as we're going forward. We keep tracks of no's and yeses and lessons learned from previous grants. Now, which brings me to lessons learned from previous grants. Here's the deal. I've got 2 more slides, this being one of them, and then I would love it if you would poke and prod and ask some questions if you feel like it. I've talked about one of the main lessons learned is implementing structures and behaviors in your organization that make this happen. I believe if you are a shop of one, you can still implement structures and behaviors to help bring in more funding to your shop of one or your partner agencies. I wouldn't be intimidated by what you may perceive as limited capacity, because within a strong partnership, even over wide geographical areas in Eastern Washington, there's great opportunity for bringing in great grants. Find a grant development process that works for you, inside, outside, or hybrid. Inside, outside, or hybrid is the way to do it. Design thoughtful, reasonable model and test it. I highly suggest a whiteboard in somebody's office, by the way, with the low odor Expo dry erase pens, by the way. The high odor ones, we've got 4 nursing moms on our staff right now, and I feel bad. They all come in my office for a grant design strategy. I'm like, you guys need to leave. It stinks in here. So go for the low odor dry erase pens. Don't overpromise and don't underpromise. If you underpromise, you're not going to get the grant. So that's not a good strategy. If you overpromise, you're going to get the grant. And then you got to implement the thing. And we've had a few grants come in where I was like, what were we thinking? We've got to do this? Who was the nut that put this together? Because I was so interested in getting it. And I let my lust for the win corrupt my thoughtfulness for having to implement this thing on the back end. And I'm not going to go into details right now. We got one of those in the shop right now. It's a pain in the butt. And we're fixing it as we go along, but I wish we hadn't done that. But those are the things you learn. Avoid unnecessary decentralization in your designs. So I'm a Seattle native. I disclosed that to you earlier. I grew up in Kirkland, back again when Bellevue Square was just one store, not a square. And what I've learned about the Seattle thing, you've heard about the Seattle process and the King County process. Seattle loves decentralization. Partnerships, multiple partnerships, partners who in turn subcontract with partners, and then they subcontract. It is just terrible in a grant design. Could you spend all your time on admin expenses and doing the contracts and monitoring the contracts and following up on the contracts? So we're trying to rein that in as much as possible, but it's hard to do in our community culture. But if you go forth, think reasonableness and think simplicity, please, and learn from our mistakes and gray hairs and anxiety. Identify, develop, maintain partnerships. I think that's been echoed a lot at this conference. Always begin with an abstract and share it, and then do the outcomes and budget.